So today I'm going to be talking about batch threshold encryption and its applications to mempool privacy. This is joint work with Arka, Sanjam, and Julien. Okay, so I want to start by talking about the life cycle of a transaction when you want to put it on a blockchain, right? So a user is going to create their transaction, sign it, and they're going to put it in this public mempool, which is visible to everyone. And miners are going to pick up whatever transactions they like and put them in a block and append it to the blockchain whenever it's their turn. But imagine this miner was adversarial, right? Let's say they were trying to make some extra money. What they could do is sandwich user trades with cleverly crafted transactions. And what this would result in is a worse execution price for the user. And in fact, this is illegal in traditional finance. What this public mempool also results in is it's very difficult for you to go and fix bugs in smart contracts. So let's say there's a vulnerable smart contract where anyone could drain all of its funds. So maybe the first step is to recover all the funds, but this front-running bot could essentially copy your transaction and just recover the funds before you. And finally, this also incentivizes forks in proof-of-work blockchains because a front-running bot might want to compete for this additional revenue that could crop up, and maybe that's so much greater than the block reward that it just makes sense to fork it. Okay, so a natural problem to this that people have come up with is using encrypted mempools. What do? Instead of submitting the transactions in the clear, you're just going to encrypt them. And the hope is that this front-running bot doesn't have enough information to essentially create these cleverly crafted transactions. Okay. Once these encrypted transactions make it onto the chain, somebody has to come in and decrypt it. It's going to be some sort of MPC. And we want it to be non-attractive for efficiency reasons. And the goal of today's talk is to essentially improve the efficiency of this non-attractive decryption step. So before we go ahead, I want to convince you that it's actually really bad to use off-the-shelf schemes. So imagine there's a transaction with, a block with B transactions. And there's N parties who have a secret shared key, and they want to decrypt this block. If you just pick up an off-the-shelf scheme like, let's say, Al-Gamal, the amount of communication that you're going to incur is order N times B. So each party needs to speak per transaction, roughly. And if you run some calculations, you'll see that this is actually 10 times more than the block size itself. And this is going to result in a propagation time of minutes instead of seconds. So this is just completely unacceptable if you want to run a blockchain. So today, what we're going to do is come up with a scheme where this key material is completely independent of the block size and only depends on the number of parties. So each party just sends one constant-size message. If you don't like blockchains, why are you in this room? OK. In a more serious sense, it's an interesting theory question, right? Can we decrypt many ciphertexts with sublinear communication? And the application could be, let's say you just have a system which is receiving many ciphertexts very quickly, but unfortunately your bandwidth is low, and can you maximize the throughput of threshold decryption here, right? So before I move on, I want to mention some related work. We're not the first ones to look at this problem, and there's in fact startups that deploy this kind of stuff. So all of these works that I've mentioned here are variants of the Bonnet-Franklin IBE scheme. If you don't know what that is, that's fine, but essentially think of it as like encrypting to some time in the future. And what's going to happen if you use this kind of scheme is that if your transaction gets stuck in the mempool for too long, the decryption material is going to be announced, but your transaction never made it on chain. So what this could mean is, let's say you're trying to make a huge trade, right? Buying millions of dollars of some token, but now your token hasn't been executed, but people sort of know you're trying to buy it, and this could really lead to other kinds of front-running attacks. So what we would like is a system where if your transaction doesn't make it on chain, it just never gets decrypted, and this doesn't exist so far. So we introduced this primitive of batched threshold encryption. So first, let me just define what threshold encryption is, and then I'll show you what the difference is to get batch threshold encryption. So the goal is pretty simple. You want to encrypt a message to N parties such that it can be decrypted by any T out of N parties. You want semantic security to hold against any subset fewer than T. And you want the ciphertext size to be constant. It shouldn't grow with the number of parties. And you want non-interactive decryption. So with a bit more pictures, there's going to be some sort of interactive procedure in the beginning. Everybody gets their secret key. There's a group public key. Clients are going to come in, encrypt using this public key. And when you want to decrypt, each party only needs to compute a partial decryption, which only takes as input the ciphertext and their share of the secret key. You don't need anybody else. You don't need to talk to anybody else. And in the end, these partial decryptions can just be aggregated into the message. And this aggregation step can be public. You don't need any secret key material for this. OK, so what is batch threshold encryption, right? I want all of these properties. But additionally, what I want is the communication required to decrypt B ciphertexts is sublinear in B. What we actually get is a protocol where it's completely independent of B. So this partial decryption size is 0 of 1. But there's a small caveat, which is you need to run an epoch setup. So for each batch that you want to decrypt, you need to run some sort of epoch-specific setup. But the good news is that this epoch setup can be carried out well in advance. And it doesn't grow with B. It's like a couple of multiplications and 1 DKG. OK, so coming to our construction, I want to begin by recalling the KZG polynomial commitment scheme. So you're given the CRS, which is the powers of tau CRS. So to commit to a polynomial f of x, you commit to it as g to the f of tau, where you can evaluate it in the exponent. So to convince a verifier that this polynomial f evaluates to y star at x star, what you're going to do is give out this proof pi, which is g to the q of tau, which is the quotient polynomial that I've defined here. And what you're going to do is check this particular identity using pairings. So you're just going to evaluate it at the random point tau. And since nobody knows tau, you can't really create fake proofs. So given this KZG polynomial commitment scheme, you can create like a very special type of encryption scheme, which says, hey, if you know an opening proof pi of this particular commitment at a point x star to some value y star, then you can decrypt my ciphertext. So instead of encrypting to some public key, you can encode this logic into your ciphertext. And it's pretty simple to do. You just add some randomness in the verification, and you use the left-hand side as a one-time pad for your message, and you give out some part of the right-hand side, which is going to allow you to recover this one-time pad. The same idea has sort of appeared concurrently to build laconic OT, and there's some alternate constructions as well. But for today, let's just focus on this KZG construction. So what's going to happen is in each epoch, the committee is going to publish a random commitment, so whatever, to some random polynomial. And clients are going to create ciphertexts such that, exactly what I said earlier, which is if you know an opening pi of this particular commitment that this committee published, at a point x star to the value y star, then you can decrypt my ciphertext, right? So now when the block is mined, what's going to happen is somehow you're going to choose B ciphertexts for this block. And what the committee is going to do is they're going to equivocate this commitment that they initially published to a commitment to a polynomial f, such that f of xi equals yi, where these xi's and yi's come from the ciphertexts. And the way they do it is a little bit involved, but just think of it as they can broadcast like a constant-sized message. And what that constant-sized message, these partial decryptions, right, what they're going to allow you to do is they're going to allow you to compute opening proofs for this polynomial f, involving this commitment com. And once you compute all these opening proofs, it's also going to allow you to decrypt all the ciphertexts. So if you use this scheme, what does encrypted mempools now look like? So let's say that's the state of the blockchain. There's a committee with a shared trapdoor. And in the current block, they're going to first publish some random polynomial commitment. And clients are going to now create these witness encryptions that I mentioned earlier. So now the mempool is fully encrypted. And once these encrypted transactions make it onto the current block, let's say it's finalized, and if people have signed off on it, the committee is going to publish this short equivocation. And they only do this after block confirmation. And all you have to do is compute the opening proofs to decrypt. So we implemented this scheme, and even for a committee size of block size of 512, it only takes like 2 to 3 seconds to actually compute the decryption of everything. And all of these are single-threaded numbers, so you could parallelize all of this as well. The encryption only takes about 6 milliseconds, and the ciphertext is about 370 bytes plus the size of your message. And each partial decryption is only going to be 80 bytes, so a really short constant-sized message. Before I conclude, I want to mention some other work that we have in encrypted mempools. It's called silent threshold encryption, and it's going to be presented at Crypto 2024. The nice part about this is that there's no interaction during the setup whatsoever, which means that the committee can change every block because you're not paying an interactive DKG, which is really expensive. And in fact, this committee could just be the validators. But unfortunately, this doesn't sort of achieve this batch threshold decryption property. It's an important open question whether you can combine these two works. And another nice property of this silent threshold encryption paper is that the threshold can be chosen at the time of encryption. Yeah, thank you for listening. That's a link to our paper, and we also have a blog post on this.